Hi, this is Amara Wiley. Today I am going to talk about the astral plane, also known as the plane of manifestation. So, this is in our pretend reality map that we've been talking about, is the third level. Remember, all of these planes of existence are occurring in the same exact location and are not separate. Um, this is where this is kind of like the spiritual double of the physical plane. It's where our dreams are, it's um, where we can walk without using our bodies. So it's where distance healing could happen, where we send energy if we're doing Reiki or shamanic healing or any kind of distance sorts of travel healing. Um, it's also a place where shapeshifting can happen. So, the way shapeshifting works, so remember, our bodies don't really exist. They're just a whole bunch of neutrons, protons, and electrons spinning around in empty space. And half of our body, more than half of our body, isn't human DNA. It's bacteria and viruses and all kinds of stuff. So if you kind of stop thinking of your body as being whole, like, a physical completeness, and instead start thinking about yourself as like little bubbles floating around in space, like tiny little bubbles floating around in space that have somehow cohered in the shape of whatever you are. Uh, in order to shapeshift, all we need to do is rearrange the bubbles, and that happens on the astral. So if you can, you know, imagine that or allow your body to kind of dissolve its current shape and create, like come apart and come together in a different shape, you can become something else. And that can be, the chameleon like qualities when we are talking to people, and in one conversation we seem one way, and in another conversation we seem another way. I know people will often think that I am exactly like them. I was talking to somebody who's on the autistic spectrum the other night who was convinced that I was autistic because they felt a connection with me. And that's because of this sort of chameleon ability to um, connect in that way, which anybody can do. Um, to a really very literal translate, literal idea of shape shifting, um, which I, I actually saw happen once after a sweat lodge. I came out of the sweat lodge. I was in a, I was riding in a Jeep with another man, a few people, but another man um, who turned like kind of turned into a fox, not like a little fox that runs around and is cute and, but his face sort of changed and became elongated, and I could see a tail, and he just had this sort of very fox like beingness, which was pretty amazing. And it was kind of a shimmering, like he didn't, literally have fox fur and whiskers, but he definitely seemed very fox-like. And another way that you could think about this is um, that we can take on a different persona or a different energy depending on what we're doing. So sometimes, I'm fairly short. I'm under 5'4". I'm pretty petite. Sometimes people will think I'm much taller than I am, or much or bigger in some way, because I have this sort of force with me. So that's kind of another way that shapeshifting can happen on this plane. It's it's kind of a sense. So then I really like talking about dreams, because dreams are a great metaphor for the physical realm. When we dream, we're in the dream, we're often not aware that the dream is not real. Sometimes we think it's very real. We'll see people who have passed away, or we have who aren't in our physical world, right? You know, our house or our town. They might be far away, and we don't think about it in our dreams while we're asleep that they're not actually with us, or that this isn't likely. Um, but then when we wake up, we go, oh, that was just a dream. Sometimes people have lucid dreaming where they can control what's happening in their dream. That, I think, is a great metaphor for the physical plane, because the way I see the physical plane is as a dream world. Um, the same way I see sleeping as a dream world, that we believe that we are in these physical bodies, that we are carrying on in this physical plane. We can, knock on something and it makes a noise, or touch ourselves and it's solid. But when we wake up, this world doesn't exist anymore. It's not real, or it doesn't have the power over us than we think we have. So that's kind of how I like to think about the dream world. Um, in so the Greeks saw the dream world as a place where they might be visited with prophecy. So they had a word that translates to standing over, where they would have a dream where some teacher or person of authority might show up in their dream and deliver a message to them. And that was kind of a direct experience of prophecy. Um, so there are all kinds of ways that, people will say, oh, dream interpretation, there's things you could look up about dream. Really, dreams are about what your own personal symbol set is. So, you know, we might have some kind of collective symbol set because we've been um, coexisting in the same culture. So we have ideas, but different people can have different ideas about what symbols are. So, for instance, one person, might see or smell an apple pie in their dream, um, and then they think, oh, I remember my mom's house. I remember baking days. I had such a good memory. And another person might be allergic to apples, and that's like a really terrifying thing to them. So it's really about our own personal symbol set, what we find in our dreams. Um, so that can be a way that we access our unconscious or a different realm of existence by paying attention to what our dreams are. Many people will have a practice of writing their dreams down, or keeping a dream journal when they wake up in the morning before they forget their dream, to write it down, to look for patterns. Um, and Sometimes things will happen in the dream that are very startling, and that's a way that our unconscious is trying to get our attention and help us to remember the dream, because not everybody remembers dreams. So you might get messages from your dreams. I think that dreams are a way that we stop being physically located, and we become more of a collective located, or we stop being so geographically located in our physical bodies, and have a much greater span of where we might be. Um, So I talked a little bit in the last video about shamanic journeying, and that has its own symbol set. The middle world is really about astral travel. If you've ever had an experience where you're sleeping or you're lying in bed and you feel like you've kind of lifted up and are looking down at your body, or are walking, sleepwalking, or walking um, outside your body, that's the astral realm. That's where we stop being so co-identified with our physical form, which I'll just keep saying is illusion. So um, the more we can, experience and experiment with the other realms, the less we become so attached to our physical body. But I will also again say that there aren't really other realms. It's all one. It's just a way of taking this reality map and helping us to um, think about or to have a thought experiment about how we aren't so attached to our bodies. But, it, when we get along on the other realms of existence, I'll give a little bit more about what I think is going on um, and why we see things so separately. But suffice it to say, here we are, the plane of manifestation. This plane is also the web of life, how we are all interconnected, which is why we can feel other people. I used to play a game with my son when he was little where I would turn my back to him and I'd have him hold up fingers behind my back, and I could usually guess how many fingers he was holding up. Partially because we were very connected, and partially because our uh, psychic senses are come through our chakras, which are front and back terminated, which I have another um, video on the chakras if that's a new concept to you. But anyway, so through that astral connection, the etheric body, I could feel what was going on behind me, and of course that seemed really cool. And then he would always try to sneak up on me, and I could feel him coming because I could sort of feel his energy moving around me, and so I because of course that was helpful as a parent to know that he was sneaking up on me, but I taught him how to sneak up on me without me being able to feel it, which basically involves kind of pulling your energy body in tightly so that it doesn't extend far enough that it brushes the other person's energy body. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that, feel free to put a comment or DM me or whatever. So so in this etheric, the astral realm, that's also where we might see auras. So if you are a visual psychic person, you might see colors or even just a glowing, space somewhere around the body. Usually auras are somewhere between 6 and 18 inches out, but that can vary and expand and contract. I know I was doing a house blessing one day, and then I went to my chiropractor, who's really sort of an energy worker more than a chiropractor, but and she said, your body, your energy is like filling the room. It's all, it's big and open, and bring it in. And I was like, oh no, that's no fun. I was enjoying having it be out there, but I don't know, whatever. I guess it was making her uncomfortable, so I kind of drew my energy back into my body, and I tend to be a very grounded person, but I kind of like being out in outer space too. It's important to be able to be grounded. So the other, I guess, thing that can be our experience of our world is the more Judeo-Christian ideas about heaven and hell exist in the etheric realm. And to my way of seeing, they kind of exist simultaneously, and we have the ability to choose one or the other at any given time. So when we are, when we talk about manifestation, that's kind of happening in this realm. Of course, plane of manifestation, right? So that's of course about manifestation, but as we speak and think, we are creating our reality in the physical realm. So here on the astral realm, we can choose to be creating our sense of paradise or creating our sense of, punishment or suffering. So whatever we are leaning towards, leaning into, the gratitude, love, excitement, peaceful, joyful energy creates more of a paradise in our physical form. And when we lean into more suffering, um, anxiety, fear-based thinking, we are creating more of a hell in our um, physical realm. And not to blame anybody if you're suffering or if you're having, things going wrong in your life, you know, my condolences and I send my sympathy, but um, it is possible to change that. You don't have to stay in the suffering. You, you know, you can get yourself, like, we have more creative ability than we have been taught, right? So although I'm not blaming you for where you are at all, you are where you are. That's okay. You don't have to stay where you are. You can choose to pull yourself out of the suffering. You can also choose to pull yourself into the suffering. So, and keep in mind that whole Brahma time thing that I've talked about before, that um, that the Indian god Brahma um, is a god that has such a long time span, that a blink of Brahma's eye is an epoch. It's 2,000 years. So when we have more Brahma thinking, when we think about the big picture or the long time of things, where we see ourselves as the ocean rather than the waves, there's just a stillness, a peacefulness that can, continue. And, um, our lives might be a little bit boring, but the there is peacefulness. So, I'm actually always really happy when my life is boring, because I like peacefulness. I like being in a state of just calmness. That's really where I live, and I have a lot of joy in that state. Right? It's not the kind of joy of jumping up and down and rah rah. That's not really my personality. My personality is very calm, stable, grounded, loving personality, um, and I like it that way. So there, people joke around about there being a proverb about there being a curse that may your life be interesting. That's a curse. That's not like a kind thing to say, because when our lives are calm, that it is much more likely that the physical part of us, and in my view, the physical part of us is kind of like dust. It's not important. Our egos, which have decided to put themselves in charge of our physical form and are super useful if you don't want to burn yourself or step in front of a bus. They're really good at that, the ego, to protect us from our physical bodies from physical harm, but not so helpful in creating a really nice space for us to live in. um, So, in terms of back to the plane of manifestation, because I seem to keep wandering back to the plane of the physical plane, um, there is uh, this is how we change how our physical world works when you manifest or whatever. It's just a knowing, a believing, a feeling in the astral plane, in the plane of manifestation, that that physical thing is already real. And what is the hardest thing for people seems to be is to take whatever hell, whatever suffering they're in at any given time, and imagine that that isn't real, and imagine that life is actually some different way. Because in order for the different way to become physical reality, it has to come from the spiritual realm of belief, perception, feelings, whatever, on the astral plane. We have to know that it is different, and that is a super hard leap for most people to make. So that's my thoughts about the plane of manifestation for today. My blessings, and I love you. Have a great week.